We'll go on the record. Witnesses Counsel has something she would like to state before we get started today.
Well, first of all, good morning and thank you. I just wanted to state for the record that we had requested that there be amplification so that the witness both could hear the different members who are here, and certainly you all as you all are asking questions, but also so that the witness herself could hear. In a construct where you all now have videotape, it seems as though being able to provide that amplification to ensure we're heard would be relevant and important. We recognize that there was concern, at least initially expressed to us, that the court reporters might not be able to conduct their duties efficiently. They indicated that they could do so that was not actually an issue. And I think in the end, what we wanted to ensure is that there's clear amplification not only of our own witness, but of all of the members who have traveled so far, to be able to ensure that everyone could be heard and that clear answers are given to questions.
And I want to again state for the record, the microphones provided by the Clintons became an issue for the audio recording. So we want crystal clear audio and visuals of today's proceedings, so the microphones were removed. We'll take into account tomorrow, and I know many of us are hard hearing, so we want to make sure that everyone speaks loudly and all the questions are clearly understood. We'll do everything we can to accommodate that.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Nothing further. We'll begin. Good morning. This is a deposition of former Secretary of State Hillary R. Clinton conducted by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform under the authority granted to it pursuant to House Rule 10. Accordingly, House Rule 10 grants the committee broad jurisdiction for the committee to conduct investigations of any matter at any time. On July 23, 2025, the Subcommittee on Federal Law Enforcement of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform voted by voice to approve a motion directing the chairman to authorize and issue a subpoena to you for a deposition. On August 5th, 2025, Chairman Comer issued a subpoena for Secretary Clinton to appear today for a deposition in furtherance of the committee's investigation into the actions and investigations of Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell. I will enter the original subpoena and corresponding cover letter from August 5, 2025, as well as the additional subpoena from December 15, 2025, determining a new date as Exhibit 1.
Excuse me, counsel. For the record, I want to put in one sentence from the cover letter to the subpoena, and that's the chairman's own definition of the scope of this investigation. He wrote, and I quote, "It's to conduct oversight of the federal government's enforcement of sex trafficking laws generally, and specifically its handling of the investigation and prosecution of Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell." Thank you.
As stated in the email correspondence with counsel for Secretary Clinton in negotiations for the scope regarding today's deposition, the scope agreed upon by counsel for the committee and counsel for Secretary Clinton stated, and I quote, "As conveyed to you in a letter from the chairman yesterday morning that you agreed to, the committee could not accept your proposed limitation on the scope of President Clinton's testimony. Accordingly, pursuant to the committee's investigation into the alleged mismanagement of the federal government's investigation into Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, the circumstances and subsequent investigations of Mr. Epstein's death, the operation of sex trafficking rings and ways of the federal government to effectively combat them, ways in which Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell sought to curry favor and exercise influence to protect their legal activities, and potential violations of ethics rules related to elected officials, the committee will ask President Clinton and Secretary Clinton all of its questions regarding Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, including, but not limited to, the personal relationships between the Clintons and Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell, and the ways in which Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell sought to curry favor and exercise influence, as well as the operation of sex trafficking rings and the ways for the federal government to effectively combat them without the proposed limitations on scope sought in your January 31, 2026 letter."
I will enter as Exhibit 2 the correspondence between Chairman Comer and counsel for President Clinton and Secretary Clinton. This correspondence includes the following letters. October 6, 2025, letter from David E. Kendall to Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Garcia. October 22, 2025, letter from Chairman Comer to David E. Kendall. November 3, 2025, letter from David E. Kendall to Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Garcia. November 21, 2025, letter from Chairman Comer to David E. Kendall. December 10, 2025, letter from David E. Kendall to Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Garcia. December 15, 2025, letter from Chairman Comer to David E. Kendall. January 3, 2026, letter from David E. Kendall to Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Garcia. January 8, 2026, letter from Chairman Comer to David E. Kendall. January 12, 2026, letter from Ashley Callan and David E. Kendall to Chairman Comer. January 13, 2026, letter from President William J. Clinton and Secretary Hillary R. Clinton to Chairman Comer, encompassing attached declarations under the penalty of perjury of both President Clinton and Secretary Clinton. January 20, 2026, letter from Ashley Callan and David E. Kendall to Chairman Comer. January 31, 2026, letter from Ashley Callan and Catherine M. Turner to Chairman Comer. And February 2, 2026, letter from Chairman Comer to Ashley Callan and Catherine M. Turner. The committee originally noticed the deposition on December 12, 2025 for Secretary Clinton to appear before the committee on December 18, 2025. I will mark that notice as Exhibit 3. I will mark as Exhibit 4 the postponed notice date December 16, 2025 for a deposition of Secretary Clinton to occur on January 14, 2026. Secretary Clinton did not appear for her deposition on January 14, 2026. I will enter as Exhibit 5 the transcript for the deposition for which Secretary Clinton failed to appear. The committee noticed a committee business meeting on January 14, 2026 to consider the contempt report for Secretary Hillary R. Clinton to be held on January 21, 2026. I will mark that notice as Exhibit 6. I will mark as Exhibit 7 the contempt report for Secretary Hillary R. Clinton, voted favorably out of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. I will mark as Exhibit 8 the final roll call vote sheet on favorably reporting the contempt report of Secretary Hillary R. Clinton out of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. The committee noticed today's deposition on February 19, 2026. I will enter the notice for this deposition as Exhibit 9. I will enter as Exhibit 10 an email thread between Committee on Oversight and Government Reform staff and counsel for President Clinton and Secretary Clinton. The email thread confirms the date, time, and location, among other terms, of today's deposition. Additionally, this email thread clearly states the agreed upon terms, including but not limited to video recording, no predetermined time limit, and scope. Can the witness please state her name for the record?
Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you. My name is Billy Grant. I am the Deputy Chief Counsel for Investigations for Chairman James Comer. Under the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform's rules, you are allowed to have counsel present to advise you during this deposition. Do you have counsel representing you in a personal capacity present with you today?
I do.
Will all counsel please identify themselves for the record?
David Kendall, Williams and Connolly, LLP.
Catherine Turner, Williams and Connolly, LLP.
Cheryl Mills, counsel to the Secretary.
Thank you. For the record, starting with the majority staff, can the additional staff members please introduce themselves with their name, title, and affiliation?
Jack Emmer, Chief Counsel for Investigations for Chairman Comer.
Peter Spector, Deputy Director of Oversight for Chairman Comer.
Daniel Ashworth, General Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Ryan Giacchetti, Chief Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Will Harness, Professional Staff Member for Chairman Comer.
Emily Feierabend, Counsel for Chairman Comer.
Melvin Soto, the Digital Director for Chairman Comer.
Ellison Tolan, Counsel, Chairman Comer. Hannah Caffey, Professional Staff Member, Chairman Comer.
Professional staff member.
Chairman Comer.
Thank you.
Could you have used a microphone?
Mark Moran, Staff Director for Chairman Comer.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you over there. Could you please repeat your name?
Austin Hacker.
No, this gentleman here in the black.
Mark Moran,
Thank you.
Staff Director, Chairman Comer.
And the next one?
Jasmine Collins, Communications Director for the Staff.
Mallory Kovars, Chief Clerk and Director of Operations, Chairman Comer.
Ashley Vineyard, Deputy Staff Director for Chairman Comer.
Would the majority members please announce themselves for the record?
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, South Carolina.
Congressman Eric Burleson, Southwest Missouri.
St. Cloud, 27th District of Texas.
Lauren Bobert, Colorado Sports District. Rep. Ana Paulina Luna, Florida 13.
William Timmons, South Carolina Sports Congressional District. Rep. John McGuire, Virginia 5th District.
Will the minority staff please identify themselves for the record? Would the minority members please announce themselves for the record?
Ranking Member Robert Garcia.
Representative Steelhouse, Silvermine, Virginia.
Representative James Walkinshaw, Virginia 11.
Representative Yasaman Ansari, Arizona's 3rd District.
And I'm James Comer, Chairman of the committee from Kentucky.
Thank you all. Secretary Clinton, before we begin, I would like to go over the ground rules for this deposition. The questioning will proceed in rounds. The majority will ask questions for an hour, and then the minority will have an opportunity to ask questions for an hour if they choose. To the extent members have questions for the witness, they will be propounded during their side's respective rounds. The clock will stop if you need to confer with counsel, your counsel is speaking, and when members or staff are speaking during the opposing side's round of questions. We will alternate back and forth until there are no more questions. Do you understand?
I do.
There is a court reporter taking down everything I say and everything you say to make a written record of the deposition. For the record to be clear, please wait until the staffer questioning you finishes each question before you begin your answer, and the staffer will wait until you finish your response before proceeding to the next question. Further, to ensure the court reporter can properly record this deposition, please speak clearly, concisely, and slowly. Also, the court reporter cannot record nonverbal answers, such as nodding or shaking your head, so it is important that you answer each question with an audible verbal answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Exhibits may be entered into the record. Majority exhibits will be identified numerically. Minority exhibits will be identified alphabetically. Do you understand?
I do.
We want you to answer our questions in the most complete and truthful manner possible, so we'll take our time. If you have any questions or do not fully understand the question, please let us know. We will attempt to clarify, add context to, or rephrase our questions. If we ask about specific conversations or events in the past and you are unable to recall the exact words or details, you should testify to the substance of those conversations or events, to the best of your recollection. If you recall only a part of a conversation or event, you should give us your best recollection of those events or parts of conversations that you do recall. Do you understand?
I do.
You are required by law to answer questions from Congress truthfully. This also applies to questions posed by congressional staff in this deposition. Do you understand?
I do.
If at any time you knowingly make false statements, you could be subject to criminal prosecution, including but not limited to perjury. Do you understand?
I do.
This includes both knowingly providing false testimony, but also stating that you do not recall or remember something when in fact you do. Do you understand?
I do.
Furthermore, you cannot tell half-truths or exclude information necessary to make statements accurate. You are required to provide all information that would make your response truthful. A deliberate failure to disclose information can constitute a false statement. Do you understand?
I do.
Is there any reason you were unable to provide truthful testimony in today's interview?
No.
Please note that if you wish to assert a privilege over any statement today, that assertion must comply with the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Pursuant to that, Committee Rule 16C1 states, for the chair to consider assertions of privilege over testimony or statements, witnesses or entities must clearly state the specific privilege being asserted and the reason for the assertion on or before the scheduled date of testimony or appearance. For the purposes of the deposition, objections must be stated concisely and in a non-argumentative and non-suggestive manner. If the witness refuses to answer a question to preserve a privilege, the committee may seek a ruling from the chair. If the chair overrules any such objection, the witness shall be ordered to answer. If the witness continues to refuse to answer a question despite being ordered to do so, the witness may be subject to sanction. Do you understand?
Insofar as I understand the rules of privilege, I don't have any specific knowledge of your committee's ideas of privilege.
Understood. Ordinarily, we take a 5-minute break at the end of each hour of questioning, but if you need a longer break or a break before that, please let us know and we will be happy to accommodate. However, to the extent that there is a pending question, we would ask that you finish answering the question before we take a break. Do you understand?
Yes.
Finally, I will note for everyone here today that the contents of what we discuss in the deposition is confidential under the House Deposition Regulation. Under the rules, the chairman and ranking minority member shall consult before any release of testimony or transcripts, including portions thereof. This means it is a violation of House and committee rules to disclose content of the deposition prior to its official release. For this reason, the marked exhibits that we will use today will remain with the court reporter so that they can go into the official transcript, and any copies of those exhibits will be kept at the table or returned to us when we wrap up. Can the court reporter please swear in the witness?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this deposition will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yep.
Do you have any other questions before we begin?
Yes, I have an opening statement that I would like to deliver before we begin. Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee, as a former United States Senator, I have respect for legislative oversight, and I expect its exercise, as do the American people, to be principled and fearless in pursuit of truth and accountability. As we all know, however, too often congressional investigations are partisan political theater, which is an abdication of duty and an insult to the American people. This committee justified its subpoena to me based on its assumption that I have information regarding the investigations into the criminal activities of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me be as clear as I can. I do not. As I stated in my sworn declaration on January 13th, I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that. Like every decent person, I've been horrified by what we have learned about their crimes. It's unfathomable that Mr. Epstein initially got a slap on the wrist in 2008, which allowed him to continue his predatory practices for another decade. Mr. Chairman, your investigation is supposed to be assessing the federal government's handling of the investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and his crimes. You subpoenaed 8 law enforcement officials, all of whom ran the Department of Justice or directed the FBI when Epstein's crimes were investigated and prosecuted. Of those 8, only 1 appeared before the committee. 5 of the 6 former attorneys general were allowed to submit brief statements stating they had no information to provide. You have held 0 public hearings, refused to allow the media to attend them, including today, despite espousing the need for transparency on dozens of occasions. You have made little effort to call the people who show up most prominently in the Epstein files. And when you did, not a single Republican member showed up for Les Wexner's deposition. This institutional failure is designed to protect one political party and one public official, rather than to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors, as well as inform the public who want to get to the bottom of this matter. My heart breaks for the survivors, and I am furious on their behalf. I have spent my life advocating for women and girls. I have worked hard to stop the terrible abuses so many women and girls face here and around the world, including human trafficking, forced labor, domestic violence, and sexual slavery. For too long, these have been largely invisible crimes or not treated as crimes at all. But the survivors are real and they are entitled to justice. In Southeast Asia, I met girls as young as 12 years old who had been forced into prostitution and raped repeatedly. Some were dying of AIDS. In Eastern Europe, I met mothers who told me how they lost their daughters to trafficking and did not know where to turn. In settings around the world, I met survivors trying to rebuild their lives and help rescue others with little support from people in power who too often turned a blind eye and a cold shoulder. If you are new to this issue, let me tell you, Jeffrey Epstein was a heinous individual, but he's far from alone. This is not a one-off tabloid sensation or political scandal. It is a global scourge with an unimaginable human toll. My work combating sex trafficking goes back to my days as First Lady. I worked to pass the first federal legislation against trafficking and was proud that my husband signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which increased support for survivors and gave prosecutors better tools for going after traffickers. As Secretary of State, I appointed a former federal prosecutor, Lucy DeBaca, to ramp up our global anti-trafficking efforts. I oversaw nearly 170 anti-trafficking programs in 70 nations and directly pressed foreign leaders to crack down on trafficking networks in their countries. Every year, we published a global report to shine a light on abuses. The findings of those reports triggered sanctions on countries failing to make progress, so they became a powerful diplomatic tool to drive concrete action. I insisted that the United States be included in the report for the first time ever in 2011, because we must hold ourselves not just to the same standard as the rest of the world, but to an even higher one. Sex trafficking and modern slavery should have no place in America. None. Infuriatingly, the Trump administration gutted the Trafficking in Persons Office at the State Department, cutting more than 70% of the career civil and foreign service experts who worked so hard to prevent trafficking crimes. The annual trafficking report required by law was delayed for months. The message from the Trump administration to the American people and the world could not be clearer. Combating human trafficking is no longer an American priority under the Trump White House. That's a tragedy, it's a scandal, and it deserves vigorous investigation and oversight. A committee endeavoring to stopping human trafficking would seek to understand what specific steps are needed to fix a legal system that allowed Epstein to get away with his crimes. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all the files. It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. It would demand testimony from prosecutors from Florida, New York, and the Department of Justice about why they gave Epstein a sweetheart deal and chose not to pursue others who may have been implicated in his crimes. And it would demand that Secretary Rubio and Attorney General Bondi testify about why this administration is abandoning survivors and playing into the hands of traffickers. It would seek out advocates and law enforcement officials on the front lines of the fight against human trafficking and ask them what support they need. And it would put forth legislation to provide more resources and force this administration to act. But that's not happening. Instead, you have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation in order to distract from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files. If the majority was serious, it would not waste time on fishing expeditions. There is too much to be done. What is being held back? Who is being protected? And why the cover-up? So my challenge to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee is the same challenge I put to myself throughout my long service to this nation. how to be worthy of the trust of the American people that they have given to you. They expect statesmanship, not gamesmanship, leading, not grandstanding. And they expect you to use your power to get to the truth and to do more to help survivors of Epstein's crimes, as well as the millions more who are victims of sex trafficking in this country and around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would also like to request that the video of this deposition be made available within 24 hours, as it has been for other witnesses.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The time reads 11:34 a.m. The majority's time will begin now. Madam Secretary, in the interest of efficiency here today, I'm going to ask you one question followed by a list of names. The question can be answered yes or no. If you do indicate yes to any individual, I will come back and revisit that at the end. The question is, have you ever communicated with any of the following people relating to Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell? Richard Kahn,
No.
Darren N. Dyke,
No.
Sarah Kellen,
No.
Doug Band,
Not that I recall.
Lawrence Summers,
No.
Huma Abedin,
Have I ever talked to her about this in preparation for this hearing? I have.
outside of that,
Not that I recall.
Noam Chomsky,
No.
Leslie Groff,
No.
Nadia Marcinkova,
No.
John Luke Brunel,
No. I don't know most of these people. Should I tell you that I know who they are, or just tell you I never talked to them?
just so you never talked to
Okay.
him, it's fine. Alan Dershowitz,
No.
Kathy Rumler,
No.
Bill Richardson,
No.
George Mitchell,
No.
Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew,
No.
Peter Mandelson,
No.
Reed Hoffman,
No.
Karina Shuliak,
No.
Bill Gates,
No.
Ehud Barak,
No.
Woody Allen,
No.
Sandy Berger,
No.
Jess Staley,
No.
Paul Morris,
No.
Leon Black,
No.
Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayam,
No.
Leslie Wexner,
No.
Jack Kessler,
No.
Mark Middleton,
No.
Harvey Weinstein,
No.
Ellie de Rothschild,
No.
Ariane de Rothschild,
No.
Lynn Forrester de Rothschild,
No.
any other members of the de Rothschild family,
No.
Glenn Dubin,
No.
Eva Anderson Dubin,
No.
Casey Wasserman,
No.
Larry Visoki,
No.
David Rogers,
No.
Ira Magaziner,
No.
Daniel Gilbert,
No.
Karen Ewing,
No.
Stacy Plaskett.
Not that I recall.
Howard Lutnick.
No, not that I recall.
Steve Bannon.
I don't know if I've ever met him. You all have to introduce me.
I take that as a no.
Just to be absolutely clear, you've asked if I've ever communicated about Jeffrey Epstein, a man I never met, with any of these people, most of whom I've never heard of and certainly not met. That's the premise of your question.
Mr. Epstein or Mrs. Maxwell.
You did not say that.
I did say that in the beginning. I will repeat the question.
No, that's okay, but I didn't talk about her with any of these people either. I
Understood.
barely knew her.
David Gergen.
No,
Elon Musk.
no,
Abigail Johnson.
no,
Jeff Bezos.
no,
Larry Page.
no,
Sergey Brin.
no,
Louis Freeh.
no.
A new member arrived. Would they please introduce themselves for the record?
Wesley Bell, Congressional, Missouri First Congressional District.
Thank you, sir.
Can I understand, could you read back the initial premise of your question, because I too did not hear?
Yes, ma'am. Have you ever communicated with any of the following people relating to Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell?
I didn't hear the Maxwell piece,
did not
but we could ask Clerk. It doesn't matter. It's the same answer, but I did not hear the Maxwell name in there.
Understood.
So was the last name you said Larry Page?
It was Sergey Brin.
The last name I stated was Louis Freeh. You indicated no, is that correct?
I think, do you need free?
Free, yes, ma'am.
Louis
No,
Free.
no,
And Sarah Kay.
no. And these are all, to the best of my recollection, as I say, many of these people I've never heard of. Most of these people I've never had a relationship with, although I know their name. Some of them are deceased. But I was not communicating about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, as I understand what you're asking me, contacting people about them. That did not happen.
Is there anyone that you had a conversation with about Ghislaine Maxwell?
Oh, I'm sure I've talked about Ghislaine Maxwell, and especially in preparation for this hearing.
And outside of conversations with your counsel, what did you talk about Ms. Maxwell?
I don't recall any conversations about Miss Maxwell, but I knew her casually, so I can't tell you that I never had a conversation that mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell's name, because I don't recall that.
Understood. And you say that you knew Ms. Maxwell casually. What does that mean?
Just what I said. I knew her primarily as someone who dated someone that I knew,
And who was that individual?
Ted Waite.
And who was Ted Waite?
Ted Waite was a successful, as I recall, software developer.
And roughly when would the first time Ms. Maxwell would have come up in relation to Mr. Waite?
I don't recall, but, perhaps sometime around 2010, because he was invited to my daughter's wedding and she was his guest.
Have you ever spoken with Ms. Maxwell personally yourself?
I'm sure I have, yes.
Did you estimate on how many occasions?
Not many. I didn't see her very often.
When would the first occasion have been?
I have no recollection.
Did your first interaction with Ms. Maxwell occur while President Clinton was President of the United States and you were First Lady of the United States?
No, I do not recall ever meeting her while Bill was still in the White House.
Did Mr. Waite ever inform you what Ms. Maxwell did for a living?
Not that I recall.
Did anyone ever indicate to you what Ms. Maxwell did for a living?
Not that I recall.
When would the last time have been that you either communicated with Ms. Maxwell, even if not directly yourself, but been around Ms. Maxwell?
The best of my recollection is at the wedding in 2010.
Would you consider Ms. Maxwell a friend?
No,
Would you consider her a friend of President Clinton?
he'll have to answer that.
Would you consider Ms. Maxwell a friend of your daughter?
She probably was friendlier with her than I was because I didn't see her very often.
How often would your daughter have seen Ms. Maxwell?
I have no idea. But again, it was in the context of her being in a relationship with Ted Waite.
Anyone else in your family have a relationship of some kind with Ms. Maxwell?
Well, that's my family. You asked about Bill and Chelsea.
And just to make clear for the record, have you ever met Jeffrey Epstein?
I do not recall ever meeting Jeffrey Epstein. In preparation for this hearing, I was told that he attended an event at the White House that was put on by the White House Historical Association. But I have no recollection of that.
And only that one time at the White House Historical Association?
That's the only time that I'm aware of that I might have possibly been in the same room with him.
Did you have an initial impression of Mr. Epstein?
I have no recollection of Mr. Epstein. I'm just told that he was in a room at a dinner that we were hosting for the White House Historical Association.
What was your understanding of what Mr. Epstein did for work?
I knew nothing about him. He was there as an invited guest by the White House Historical Association. That's my best recollection.
And no one else informed you of what Mr. Epstein did for work?
No, but we had hundreds and thousands of people who came to the White House. I was not informed of what people did or didn't do for work, especially someone that I never even had a conversation with.
Do you know who invited Mr. Epstein to the White House?
I can only tell you what I know, which is that he apparently was a guest invited by the White House Historical Association to attend a dinner to thank people who gave money to the White House Historical Association for the upkeep and maintenance of the White House. That's what I was informed of in preparation for coming here.
Yes, ma'am. And understanding we focused the last few questions on your time in the White House with President Clinton. After that time period of President Clinton's administration, did anyone ever tell you what Mr. Epstein did for a living?
I don't recall ever talking about Mr. Epstein was not on my radar. He was not somebody that I had any connection to.
When President Clinton was traveling with Mr. Epstein on Clinton Foundation business, no one associated with the foundation at that time discussed Mr. Epstein with you?
Not that I recall. I was not involved with the foundation. I was a senator from New York, and I was deeply committed to my work, and it became one of the most intense experiences of my life when we were attacked on 9/11. I was not involved with what was happening to create the foundation, to create the work that was done to get low-cost drugs for AIDS. I knew about the work. I didn't know about the details.
Understood. And to be clear, you never had any communication yourself with Mr. Epstein, whether that be face-to-face interaction, phone calls, emails, text
Asked and
messages?
answered. You can answer it again.
I have no recollection in any way of ever having any conversation at the White House or in any other place or on any kind of device of any sort. I knew nothing about him.
And when did you learn of Mr. Epstein's 2006 indictment and subsequent arrest leading to his incarceration in 2008?
I have no idea. I was not paying attention. I was running for re-election in 2006. I ran for president in 2007, 2008. I don't know that I ever learned about it until much later when more things came out about him.
Understood. And when did you first learn of Mr. Epstein's arrest in 2019?
Probably when it happened, because it was headline news. I'm sure I, like everybody else, saw it in the press.
And in seeing that in the press, did you discuss Mr. Epstein or his case at the time with anyone?
I'm sure we did, because it was a, big story.
And Mr. Epstein died in custody following his 2019 arrest. When would you have learned of his death?
Whenever it was reported.
Going back slightly a question, you said you likely would have talked to someone regarding his arrest in 2019. Who would you have discussed that with?
Whoever was around. I mean, it was a big story, as you recall. It was a very big story. I don't have any specific recollections. It wasn't something that I was particularly focused on, but it was a big story.
And going back to Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, when did you learn of her arrest in 2021?
Again, whenever it was reported as happening.
And did you discuss that with anyone?
I'm sure I did. It was another big story.
And who would those discussions have been with?
I don't have any specific recollection.
So moving forward in time just a little bit, you were Secretary of State under President Obama, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it was during his first term, 2009 to 2013?
That's correct.
And after you completed your time as Secretary of State, did you return in any role to the Clinton Foundation?
I did. I became active in it at that point.
And by being active in it, could you describe that for us, please?
Tried to support the work that Bill and my daughter and the team had done, and look for ways to be helpful. It was something that I wanted to make sure I could support.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. You rejoined as a board member, is that right?
It may have been the first time I was a board member. I don't remember. Either the first or the second time. Yeah.
And speaking of, it sounds like you were heavily involved when you returned to the foundation, or I guess started with the foundation at this point. In trying to accomplish those goals and initiatives, what were you doing, broadly speaking, on a daily basis, monthly basis, that sort of thing?
Well, I wanted to start a program about early learning for kids, and so we started something called Too Small to Fail, which I was very actively involved in with my daughter, and we worked with pediatricians and other people to help parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles read, talk, and sing to their children so that they could help build brain cells. That was a major priority of mine, and I'm very proud of what we've built and the difference that it's made in, millions of kids' lives. I certainly did what I could to support the work that we do overseas through the Clinton Global Initiative, which has had a terrific track record of bringing people together to work in partnerships, to make commitments, to try to improve everything from, clean water to solar energy to improved education, all of the priorities that the partners we have bring to us that we try to help them with.
And thank you for that, Madam Secretary. We've had a few members join us. Would you guys please announce yourselves for the record?
Yes, Pat Fallon, 4th District of Texas. Scott Perry, 10th District of Pennsylvania.
Thank you both.
You're the last person.
Mr. Perry, Scott Perry.
Thank you so much.
And Madam Secretary, as a board member, what type of responsibilities does that entail?
Oh, attending the board meetings, approving the agenda of work for the year, the budget that goes with it, that kind of responsibility.
And you mentioned the Clinton Global Initiative. Just for clarity, I will likely refer to that as CGI as we go forward with this. CGI is a part of the Clinton Foundation, is that accurate?
Yes.
And what was your role with CGI at this time period, right after you left being Secretary of State?
It was, again, to, support the staff that put together both the annual meeting, but also work during the year with our partners who'd made commitments to help them fulfill their commitments. So, if there were a meeting about a commitment that was made to get clean water to some very remote place, if there were a meeting, I might be invited to it to meet with the partners, to encourage them. It was mostly around the work that happens throughout the year in preparation for the annual meeting.
And forgive my ignorance, please, what happens at those annual meetings?
The annual meetings are a way for people to come together to make commitments that they have previewed with our staff. So I'll give you an example. Probably around, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 15 years ago, I don't know specifically, Matt Damon, the actor, came to the Clinton Global Initiative because he said he really cared about clean water, and could we connect him with people that he could work with to get more clean water in more places in the world? So we did. We connected him to this gentleman who was a real expert on clean water. They started working together. They created something called water.org, which was a Clinton Global Initiative commitment that was made at the annual meeting. And then our staff worked with them, and I think it's fair to say that, they've been one of the most successful organizations in actually delivering clean water. But it's that kind of work. It's people who might have a good idea, maybe they've got some resources, maybe they have some experience. I'll give you another idea. So Procter & Gamble called us and said, one of our scientists, one of our chemists in the UK has created this packet of chemicals that can literally make the dirtiest water clean enough to drink. But we don't know what to do with it because we're a consumer company that sells products to middle-class people. This is something that would go to the very poor. What do we do with it if we come to CGI? Can you connect us with somebody who can help us? So we connected them with World Vision, and I think maybe one or two other organizations. And so they used the packets to literally go around the world cleaning water. And Bill went with them, Chelsea went with them, and they would go to rural Myanmar or rural Kenya, and they would take this bucket of dirty water and they'd dump the packet in, and then my daughter and my husband would drink it to show that it was clean. And that was a CGI commitment. We bring together governments, local, state, national, businesses, philanthropies, NGOs, academics, anybody who has a good idea that we can help them work on and try to fulfill. That's what we do.
And thank you. The Clinton Foundation started shortly thereafter your husband, President Clinton, left office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And CGI started a few years later. Is that right?
I think that's right. I think it started maybe 2005, maybe? I'm not sure.
And does CGI or the foundation more broadly perform any work in sex trafficking or human trafficking around the world?
There may be partners who make commitments about that. We have thousands and thousands of commitments, so I can't answer yes or no, but it might be an area that some of our commitment makers would be focused on.
And how did the foundation, the Clinton Foundation, how did that idea come to fruition? Was that your idea, President Clinton's idea?
Oh no, the Clinton Foundation was all Bill's idea. He set it up as he was leaving the White House. It was the entity that raised the money to build the Clinton Presidential Center, and then to carry on the work that he wanted to do. You know, shortly after he got out of the White House, he and Nelson Mandela were asked to come to the annual AIDS conference to see whether the two of them could do something that needed to be done, which was to try to stem the epidemic of HIV/AIDS. And so Bill started out trying to figure out how to deal with this problem and came to the conclusion that the best way would be to lower the price of the drugs that were being used in the United States but were too expensive to be used around the world in order to treat more people. And I really give huge credit to both Bill's idea about how to do that, but also huge credit to President George W. Bush, because when President Bush took Bill to Pope John Paul's funeral in Rome, he and Bill were talking because President Bush was coming forward with the PEPFAR program. And so he and Bill were talking, and President Bush was very committed to this, and Bill was very committed. And so Bill said to President Bush, I now have generic drugs being made in places like India that are much cheaper than the brand name drugs, and you could, with tax money, treat many more people. And so President Bush, to his credit, said, yeah, but my folks tell me that the drugs aren't as good as ours. And Bill said, I'll give them to you, you give them to the FDA, you test them, and I'll abide by your test. I think you can ask him if you want tomorrow, but I think he gave, I don't know, like 24 drugs, and the FDA approved 22, and President Bush was as good as his word. And so we began as the United States and the Clinton Foundation, because of that connection and that partnership, we began treating millions of people with low-cost drugs with federal PEPFAR money, saving millions of lives. Sadly, that's going to be reversed because of the attitudes of this administration and the cutbacks, but it was one of the great services to humanity. And I give President Bush and I give my husband enormous credit for doing something that wasn't going to get them headlines, wasn't going to get them, some kind of, statue put up, but was saving millions of lives, preventing mother-to-child transmission, preventing, people from dying. So that's what he was doing.
And thank you for that. Did Mr. Band play a significant role in helping set up the foundation initially?
Yes, he did.
And when CGI was initially created, whose idea was that?
It was Bill's idea. He went to Davos, and he called me after he'd been at Davos, and he said, a lot of interesting people, but they don't do anything but talk. And I have a better idea. Why don't we get people together? And yeah, they can talk, but they have to make commitments, and they have to follow through on the commitments. And we could have an annual meeting that would bring people who were willing to make commitments. And that was his idea, and I thought it was a really good idea, and I encouraged him to go out and see if he could put it together.
Are you aware of Are you aware of anyone else helping formulate the idea for CGI?
Oh, I think he talked to a lot of people. I couldn't tell you who, but he talked to a lot of people.
Did Mr. Epstein have a role in shaping the formation of CGI?
I have no idea. I don't know anything about it.
Did Glenn Maxwell have any role in shaping CGI?
I don't have any idea about that.
I will enter as Majority Exhibit 11 the interview between Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and Ms. Glenn Maxwell from July of 2025. We will get you all a copy momentarily.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And I'm sorry, what was this exhibit?
This will be Majority 11. I would like to direct your attention to page 263.
Okay.
And on page 263, Ms. Maxwell tells Mr. Blanche that she had a role in shaping CGI. You said you were not aware of Ms. Maxwell having any role in shaping CGI.
I was not involved in the creation of CGI. Again, I was in the United States Senate. I was not involved in the work that was done to set up CGI.
No one discussed the formation of CGI with you?
That it was going to be set up, but I don't have any specific recollection of having any specific knowledge of it, no.
Did Mr. Epstein help craft the idea or formulation of CGI?
I don't have any idea. I don't know anything about that.
Is it possible that Ms. Maxwell had a role in creating CGI?
I'm not going to speculate. I'm here to tell you what I know, and I don't know anything about that.
Understood. And is it possible Mr. Epstein had a role in crafting CGI?
I'm not going to speculate about that either because, I have no way of knowing that because I have no direct knowledge.
I will enter now as Majority Exhibit 12. This will be a letter from Mr. Epstein's attorneys. I will give you a second for it to be passed out. This is a letter dated July 6, 2007. It is from Gerald B. Lefcourt. He was an attorney for Mr. Epstein. He sent this to the prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida. That would be Sloman, Minchell, Lori, and Villafania. And I will direct your attention to page 21. At that top paragraph on page 21, it says, quote, Mr. Epstein was part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative, which is described as a project bringing together a community of global leaders to devise and implement innovative solutions to some of the world's most pressing challenges. Again, is it possible that Mr. Epstein played a role in crafting CGI?
I have no idea what he did or what he said he did, and I have no way to testify to the veracity of either. I was not involved.
Have you seen this document before?
No.
The Clinton Foundation accepts donations as part of carrying out its work. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And when seeking, let me take a step back, people charitably provide donations to the foundation?
It's a 501c3, yes.
And do you or anyone else at the foundation ever solicit donations for the foundation?
I'm sure that happens. People talk to us, we talk to people, they ask questions about the work that's being done, and I'm sure that happened in the years before I was involved.
Did you solicit funds from Jeffrey Epstein for the foundation?
I had no contact with Jeffrey Epstein. I did not solicit funds from Jeffrey Epstein.
Did you solicit any funds for the foundation from Ms. Maxwell?
I did not. Again, we're talking about the creation of the foundation. I was not involved in the creation of the foundation or the creation of CGI. In those early years, I was incredibly focused on my job in the Senate. Bill was focused on setting up the foundation and starting CGI.
And understanding you were occupied with your career as a senator and then your presidential campaign leading up to 2008, but at this time, were you discussing starting the CGI with President Clinton?
I'm going to object to any communications between the two of them. You can ask generally, but that's covered by the marital communications privilege.
Understood. So generally speaking.
I am sure that I talked to my husband about what he was doing to set up the foundation. It was more on the substance of the work. How many drugs was he getting made in India? What was the idea that was going to motivate CGI to be what he wanted it to be? It was not in the weeds. It was the concept. It was, the excitement that he had about trying to establish the foundation and CGI.
And similar question for Mr. Band. Did you discuss the creation of CGI with Mr. Band?
I may have, because he was around. He worked for my husband. He was a personal aide to my husband, but I don't have any recollections of any specific conversations.
broadly speaking, at any time, do you recall any discussions related to distancing the foundation or CGI from Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell?
I don't recall any conversations. I know that sometime, maybe 2003 or so, Bill did not have any ongoing contact with Epstein. And in preparation for this hearing, you know, it became clear to him that Epstein was not interested in the charitable work that was motivating Bill as he traveled around the world, getting people to commit to providing low-cost drugs for not just HIV/AIDS, but eventually tuberculosis, malaria, and other diseases.
And what is your understanding of Mr. Epstein no longer wanting to participate in the foundation's philanthropic goals?
I don't, only in preparation for this have I been told that, you know, there was no real interest there. And, you know, there was no point in being involved or connected to him.
And we touched on this. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said you're not aware of Mr. Epstein donating to the foundation. Would you consider, let me back up. President Clinton took trips on Mr. Epstein's jet, is that correct?
Yes.
Would you consider offering a private jet as a donation in kind to the foundation?
Well, I don't know what the rules are under the 501c3 regulations, but it was certainly a gift, and he was, you know, one of a number of people who provided transportation so that Bill could do the work he was doing.
I think we touched on this. Did Mr. Epstein end up donating to the foundation or CGI?
I have no personal knowledge of that.
You're not aware of a $25,000 donation from Mr. Epstein's affiliated companies to the foundation?
Only what I was told was alleged in preparation for this testimony. I did not know about that, and I don't know that it's true.
Are you aware of the Clinton Foundation reviewing any records in regard to Mr. Epstein donating to the foundation?
I will have to ask our lawyers, 'cause I did not.
Have you had any conversations about the foundation reviewing those donations made by Mr. Epstein?
I think I'll have to ask our lawyers. I don't know. I didn't review them.
Understood. Ms. Mace, did you have some questions?
I did. Thank you for being here this afternoon. In your opening remarks, you mentioned this is political theater and partisan. Do you believe the Epstein files are a vast right-wing conspiracy?
I think if they are fully released as the Transparency Act requires, that would be fulfilling the responsibility of the Justice Department, but it appears that there have been many issues with the full release, so I'm not going to characterize it other than to say I think that's a well-known fact.
Are you aware that both Republicans and Democrats voted to subpoena you and your husband?
I am here.
Okay. Are you aware both Republicans and Democrats voted to hold you in contempt when you didn't show up?
I am here.
Is that partisan when both parties vote to do something together? Is that partisan or nonpartisan?
I think it's standing up for the institution, but there are many other aspects of the committee's work that strikes me as avoiding the main issues about who should be sitting here, who has actual information that might be useful to your investigation.
As a survivor, I'm a survivor. I appreciated your opening statement and your prioritizing some of these issues. Have you always believed this way? Have you believed this way for some time?
Have I what?
Have you believed what you believed in your opening statement for some time?
Yes, I have.
How long have you had those beliefs or held those beliefs in your opening statement?
Very long.
In 1998, you had those same beliefs?
Yes.
2005?
Yes.
2008?
Yes.
2012?
Sure.
2016?
Mm-hmm.
2020?
Mm-hmm.
2024 to present day, you've held these beliefs the whole time?
Yes, I have.
Have you always believed that women abused by powerful men should be believed?
I know where you're going with this, and I have
Do you?
nothing to say about anything in the past. I'm here to answer questions about this investigation.
So do you believe that women who are abused by Epstein and in Epstein's circle of associates should be believed?
I think that many of them have made very credible accusations.
Have you always thought that, do you think that women abused by powerful men should get justice?
I think that they should have their time to be evaluated, and where there is adequate evidence, they should certainly get justice, and perpetrators should be held to
The
account.
question was, have you always thought that women abused by powerful men should get justice?
Yes, absolutely.
I agree. Are you aware that, you were aware, I think you said this earlier, that Jeffrey Epstein was convicted in 2008 for procuring a child for prostitution and soliciting a prostitute, correct?
That's what the charges were, yes.
And you were aware of that in 2008?
I don't recall that I was aware then.
And in 2008, you were a U.S. Senator still?
I was.
Would you say that Jeffrey Epstein is one of the world's most prolific sex traffickers?
From what we know, he certainly engaged in his predatory activities for a long period of time.
Would you say he's one of the world's most prolific sex traffickers?
I don't know what to compare it to. There are terrible sex trafficking rings all over the world.
And you said you were Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013?
Mm-hmm.
And you state your agency prioritized combating sex trafficking internationally, correct?
That's correct.
During your time as Secretary of State, did you or the state receive any intelligence cables or briefings mentioning Epstein's foreign travel, pedophile island, or his network of pedophiles and sex trafficking?
Not that I am aware of, no.
How did you miss it? If he's, I believe, one of the most prolific sex traffickers in the world, you were Secretary of State, how did you miss it?
Well, that would have been a matter of the Justice Department, not the State Department.
But in your opening statement, and your statements earlier in your opening statement, you stated that Secretary Rubio should be called to testify. And you said that he has, and the administration has, quote, abandoned survivors using the same logic. You were Secretary of State during a time period after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of being a pedophile and soliciting children for sex. Why then did you, quote, using your own logic, abandon survivors?
What is the question, please?
I followed her comment. First of all, we focused on whether there were laws that made sex trafficking, sexual slavery, domestic violence, other abuses of women on the books in countries. And then we tried to evaluate, were those laws being implemented? And were judges appropriately trained and briefed about how to implement those laws? Were governments taking them seriously? We looked at the broad institutional approach to these very serious abuses.
Would you say the U.S. government at that time, during this time period, was appropriate with the way that it handled Epstein?
I don't think that you could say that was true about any of the government's prosecutorial efforts, starting with the Southern District of Florida and Alex Acosta and all those who basically gave him a sweetheart deal. And then I think going up the chain, there was very little attention paid that should have been paid. But we had laws on the books. They were not being implemented. But that was not within my purview, because what we were looking at is what's the institutional structure, and can we do more to make sure countries take it seriously? Our country had laws on the books.
So
this man was not held to account.
If it was not in your purview when you were Secretary of State, then why is it today in Secretary Rubio's purview?
Because what's happened is that the office that was actually following what was going on around the world has been decimated. 70% of the staff is gone. It's impossible to carry out the functions of that office if you don't have a critical number of people. So my question would be to Secretary Rubio, is there more that can be done?
I'm running out of time here. you were clothed with immense power as Secretary of State. You've stated on the record in your opening statement that child sex trafficking in general, human trafficking, trafficking of all kinds was a priority. You were clothed with immense power. Your husband was clothed with immense power. And until you got this subpoena, and until these files were out in the open, you did nothing to try to effectuate all of these things. You say that should have been done. Is that correct?
No, it's totally incorrect. I mean, all of your assumptions are ones that I reject.
When you saw photos of your husband in a hot tub laying on a beach and getting massaged by other women, and you knew that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in some of these trips and these things, did it concern you at all?
I'm here not to offer my opinions. I'm here to answer specific questions to the best of my ability.
When you saw your husband in these photos with a young woman being massaged, what went through your mind?
I am not going to speculate.
You didn't have any feelings about young women massaging your husband?
I am not going to offer opinions or speculation about anything that I have no context for and was not there.
After you learned that Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of sex crimes with kids, did any of these photos of your husband with women being massaged on the beach, did it concern you?
I have no context for even answering that question. And I think, obviously the innuendo, all the rest of it.
I'm asking a black and white question. I'm not putting any leading statements into it or adjectives. Did you do anything to determine what was happening in those images or on those trips that once you saw these photos, once you realized Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender of children, did you do anything to determine what was happening on these trips with your husband?
I don't find any of your questions to be relevant to the investigation.
Well, it is relevant if a former president was traveling around with young women.
Well, you'll have a chance to talk to him tomorrow.
You said this morning you did not solicit funds from Jeffrey Epstein, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Did anyone solicit funds from Jeffrey Epstein on your behalf?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you ever invite Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell to any of your political fundraisers?
I did not personally invite them to my political fundraisers.
Did anyone personally invite them on your behalf?
I do not know.
Is the purpose of a political fundraiser to solicit funds?
You would know that it is.
Okay, and you stated this morning you've never communicated with a Sarah Kay, correct?
I do not know who Sarah Kay is.
Okay, she's a councilwoman from New Rochelle, which is about how many miles from here?
Not very far away.
20 to 25?
I have no idea.
I have an exhibit I would like to enter. This is an email dated September 30th, 2014. Am I allowed to enter an exhibit?
Yes, ma'am. This will be Exhibit 13, I believe. Majority Exhibit 13.
Okay, it's from September 30th, 2014.
Can you please provide the witness with a copy?
Okay. You have a copy of it? Yeah. You guys have it?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And can you read me the subject line of the email?
Following up event with Hillary Clinton and Congresswoman Lowy.
Do you know who Congresswoman Lowy is?
She was our congresswoman here for many years.
And who is the email from?
Someone named Sarah Kay.
Above that, you have that very top one. Okay. All right, from Sarah Kay, and it's redacted on who it was sent to. Can you read me the email?
Okay, thank you very much for the prompt reply. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for the invitation, but unfortunately, Jeffrey will not be able to attend. Thanks so much for speaking with me just now. Attached, please find the invitation and response card for the event we spoke about with Hillary Clinton and Congresswoman Lowy at the Harvard Club. That was a fundraiser, I believe, for Congresswoman Lowy that I attended to support her, is my recollection.
Okay. And this is an email, this is an invitation to the fundraiser where you were there.
Do you have any idea if the Epstein referred to is the Jeffrey Epstein? There's a lot of people named Epstein in this area.
This is in the DOJ files.
I have no knowledge of it.
It says Mr. and Mrs. Epstein.
Yeah, I have no knowledge of this.
Okay, so it could be a different Jeffrey Epstein.
You're showing me an email from someone who I don't recall knowing about a fundraiser that wasn't for me but was for Congresswoman Lowy. I have no information. Okay. I went to the fundraiser to support my friend Nita Lowy.
All right.
Excuse me, can I interrupt?
I have
there
another
are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying from inside this room. Can you please advise me as to whether or not that's permissible and consistent with the rules, particularly given that we have asked for a public hearing? If there are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying, can you please explain how that
I'm
can
done
occur?
with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's
So I would like
sakes.
to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was,
It doesn't
Excuse
matter.
me.
We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So I
well,
would like to take a break at this moment.
yeah,
and I'd like to have a
I'm done
conversation.
for now.
Go off the record.
Go off the record.
We'll go back on the record. The majority's time had approximately 5 minutes left in it. I believe that the witness or her counsel would like to make a quick statement.
Thank you so much. We've just used the break because we learned during the process of these hearings that the committee was violating its own rules in members tweeting and sharing pictures of what is going on inside this closed hearing, a hearing that we have asked repeatedly to be open to the public. Chairman Comer was gracious enough to engage with me on this matter. We asked specifically to invite the press in, since the committee had already made decisions on its own unilaterally to release pictures and other things that are going on in this room. He indicated that he wanted to speak to that himself directly. I'd like to just say for the record, we find it unacceptable, we find it unprofessional, and we find it unfair. We are looking forward to this being conducted under the rules and being conducted consistent with the expectations of how members of Congress, I know, take this matter so seriously and do it in that vein. We would also like to just indicate as a practical reality that we are here in good faith. We are counting on the good faith of all the members.
Thank you. Chairman Comer.
Yeah, I'd like to state for the record, I've advised my members that no photos or videos during the deposition can be released. I understand the posted photo was taken before the deposition started. We will, that will not happen again, and we will look forward to continuing with the deposition.
I'd like to make just a clarification there, Mr. Chairman. It was taken in this room after the witness sat down. It is not a basis that because she had not started speaking that it would be appropriate for there to have been a release of anything that was occurring in this room.
And we have made clear that that's not allowed, and I will also say we were disappointed that the Secretary's opening statement was leaked to the press before she even gave her opening statement.
So the Secretary's statement was not leaked to the press. It was provided, as with other witnesses, including Mr. Wexner, who provided his before giving. Hers was given simultaneous. And so what we don't want is the Secretary to be treated any differently than other witnesses. That seems to be a consistent pattern, and we would love that pattern not to continue.
We've gone to great lengths to make all the accommodations that you all have requested. So we will, again, the members have been advised that is unacceptable. So
Thank you.
we look forward to continuing the deposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you addressing it.
Ranking Member Garcia.
Thank you. No, I just want to add, it's completely unacceptable that Oversight Republicans and its members in this moment chose to violate both committee rules and the agreement that they negotiated directly with Secretary Clinton. Now, the Clintons requested a public hearing specifically to avoid this exact situation. Now, Secretary Clinton has offered to continue speaking throughout this deposition if we also allow the press to come in and on the record. Now, the majority has continued to refuse this. I want to make very clear for the record that Oversight Democrats agree today they should be allowed here into the deposition. That's been our position from day one. Thank you.
And with that, the majority will conclude its first hour. We'll go off the record.
We can go back on the record. I understand council has something that they would like to say before we get started.
Yes, I would. First of all, I'd like to say I appreciate everyone being here today, but I want to start with, we've just learned that there has been a second violation of the promise that the chairman made with respect to no photos being taken in this room during this hearing. As you know, we have asked for and did ask Mr. Comer for the press to be invited in. They are sitting right outside, literally. He has been speaking with them, and we have been asked that they be invited in. at the last break because we learned that there was a member who was sharing photos from inside this room in violation of this committee's own rules. We have now been presented with a second photo of the witness, Secretary Clinton, while she has been testifying in this room. That is completely inconsistent with the rules. It's completely in violation, and it's also in violation of the promise that Mr. Comer just made with respect to it would not happen again. And indeed it did. And so I would like to ensure that when we go back on the record and when Mr. Comer elects to rejoin the room, I note he has left for the record, I would like to be able to ensure that we address that. Or, sorry, he has not left. He's down at the end. There's been a second violation, Mr. Chairman, so now I do really feel that it would be appropriate for the press to be invited in because someone has already violated the commitment and promise you made that there would not be any further violations.
Do you have a copy of the picture? We're on.
I am confident that one of the individuals here can share with you a copy of the picture, and I would rather that at this point, we invite the press in.
We don't know who's.
We're gonna show the photo.
It's from who?
I believe it's from the same influencer. Emily, go with Andrew to make sure we have the same.
That's for you.
That's her.
We were saving your seat.
Mr. Chairman, will you allow the press in at this time, since there has been a second violation of your clear guidance that no further pictures.
To consult, to confer with the chairman.
Go off the record, please. We can go back on the record.
Thank you very much. We have examined the second photo that was taken inside this room in violation of the committee's rules. Mr. Chairman, you have indicated that you will assure that that will not happen again. Mr. Chairman, we continue to believe that the remedy for this is to invite the press in at this juncture. We believe that there is no reason not to do so. We recognize that you continue to resist having the press join, but if you would like, we would welcome that. Otherwise, we would welcome no further violations.
What was the last part? You would welcome.
I know it's hard to hear without amplification.
No further violations, no further violations. But I would like to note one thing, if I may. A New York Times reporter tweeted that her dim member in the room, and then she said, you know, that Maxwell was at Chelsea's wedding because she was dating a friend who brought her as a +1 and all that. So there's a Democrat member leaking to the press what's going on in here, according to the Annie Carney.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. I know part of this is always about the tit for tat, and I think that's what we're trying to address. We're here and we're speaking with respect to the witness and what has been a violation of a photo of her inside this room. I'm not trying to get into anybody else's First Amendment rights. When it comes to the photo, please instruct your member to take the photo down until after.
I have.
Thank you so much. Nothing further.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is. I'll be doing most of the questioning for the minority today. First, I want to thank you for your long and distinguished service to this country.
Thank you.
I'd also want to thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before we get to questions, I'd like to take a few minutes and highlight some context that we think is relevant for today's conversation. To be candid with you, it's not clear to us that you have much information to share with this committee that would be relevant to our investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. For example, I would like to introduce as Minority Exhibit A this excerpt from Ghislaine Maxwell's interview with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. I'll read out loud the relevant excerpt for you. You can see that Ms. Maxwell was asked, quote, "Do you know whether Mr. Epstein knew or had any sort of visit, dealings, or associated with Hillary Clinton?" And Ms. Maxwell said, quote, "I would say no." Ms. Maxwell was asked, quote, "Did you ever see them together?" Ms. Maxwell said no. So, there are some events we're aware of where you might have been in the same place as Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell at the same time. We'll ask about those, but we are a little confused about why we're even here. I imagine you might have your own perspective on this. You shared a little bit of that earlier. Is there anything more you'd like to share from your point of view on today's conversation before we get started?
Thank you very much, Counsel. I appreciate your recognition of the context. I do not think I am or could be a significant witness to anything that would affect the work of this committee with respect to the investigation. I understand that that was a decision made to subpoena me, and I thought it would have been more appropriate to treat me in the context in which you have just placed me. That's why I offered a sworn statement outlining my lack of knowledge with respect to either Epstein or Maxwell and the crimes that they committed. But the majority of the committee and then the entire committee determined that they wished to talk with me. And it is, still somewhat of a puzzle for me to be here and trying to answer your questions to the best of my ability because I don't think it's a good use of the committee's time. The matters that are included within the broad scope of the investigation as described by the chairman are ones that I take very seriously, and I would personally like to see the committee pay attention to those who have information that could be responsive.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'd like to start our conversation with a few foundational questions so we can get a clear record from the very beginning. And you've covered some of this earlier, but I want to be really clear for the transcript. Before his crimes became public, did you have any knowledge of the sexual abuse that Jeffrey Epstein was committing against girls and young women?
No.
Before her crimes became public, did you have any knowledge of the sexual abuse that Ghislaine Maxwell was committing and facilitating against girls and young women?
No.
Our colleagues have suggested that they need to speak with you because Ghislaine Maxwell's nephew worked for your 2008 presidential campaign and then at the State Department when you were Secretary of State. That is somebody named Alexander DeRossi. Are you familiar with Alexander DeRossi?
I am. Alex DeRossi volunteered for my 2008 presidential campaign. I did not know him. I don't know what motivated him to be a volunteer, but he proved to be a very effective contributor to the campaign. He earned a paid position on the campaign. All of my staff that interacted with him on the campaign had a very high regard for his intelligence and his skills. He's an extremely well-educated young man. And when I became Secretary of State, he was recommended for a job that he was well suited for. I had absolutely no idea that he was in any way related to Ghislaine Maxwell until I received the subpoena from this committee suggesting that he was, and that was the first I knew of it.
So is it fair to say that as far as you know, Mr. DeRossi was not hired for your campaign or at the State Department because he was Ghislaine Maxwell's nephew?
That is absolutely fair to say, and I can't speak for everyone in my campaign. Obviously, it's a huge enterprise, but I would be surprised if anyone knew that he was related to Ghislaine Maxwell, but I can absolutely testify to the fact that I did not.
Are there any other accusations or claims that have been made against you with respect to Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell that you would like to address before we move into some chronological questions?
Well, I don't keep up with all the conspiracy theories and the crazy allegations that populate the internet, so I'm sure there are. But I will do my best to answer your questions as you pose them.
Okay. I will ask a series of chronological questions. I know most of these are from a long time ago. If you don't recall, just tell me you don't recall. As an initial matter, would you recall roughly how many events and receptions would you have attended at the White House during your time as First Lady?
Well, I was privileged to be at the White House as First Lady for 8 years, and I have no way of giving you an accurate number, but they would be in the thousands. And they were, you know, one of the great privileges of being in the White House, hosting events, hosting meetings, meeting people, using the rooms of the White House, using the grounds of the White House. So many hundreds, maybe thousands of events, but many, many thousands of people.
I was just going to ask if you could estimate how many people you might have met at those hundreds or thousands of events and receptions.
Well, Counsel, I can't say I met every person who ever attended an event, and so I can't really give you an accurate number. But if the event was a small event, perhaps I would meet everyone. But for most of the large events that we hosted, it was hit or miss if I met somebody or didn't meet somebody. For the huge Christmas receptions, which were thousands of people that would come to enjoy the holiday decorations at the White House. So I can't really give you a totally clear answer other than I did my best to greet people and to be an appropriate hostess because I took seriously my responsibilities as First Lady.
So Mr. Epstein visited the White House a fair amount during your husband's first term in office. One, and I think the only specific event that we're aware of where you may have been present was, as you mentioned earlier, a September 29th, 1993 reception for donors to a White House renovation project that was funded through the White House Historical Association. And our understanding is there was some kind of reception that night. Do you have any recollection of attending that event or that reception?
I have no specific recollection, but I know that I was expected to, and I assume I did. But I can't, sitting here today, describe anything specific about that event. But I was very anxious to support fundraising that went to the White House Historical Association that in turn supported the upkeep and the maintenance of the White House. Because certainly, it was an old building with a lot of very valuable furniture and art, and it took a lot of wear and tear because I just finished explaining we had thousands of people who would come through. And I'm not even talking about the visitors who would come through, because that was many, many more thousands. So the house itself needed to be carefully cared for, and so my husband and I hosted the event, and the White House Historical Association brought those who had contributed because it was ultimately beneficial for the White House.
Would it be correct to say that sitting here, you have no specific memory or recollection of meeting Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell at that event in 1993?
That is an accurate statement. In fact, when I got the subpoena, I was incredulous because I never thought I was in the same room with Jeffrey Epstein. And it was brought to my attention that he was very likely to have attended the White House Historical Association, but I have no independent recollection of that.
Okay. It has been publicly reported that Mr. Epstein visited the White House 16 other times during your husband's first term. He was signed in by different staff members and visited different parts of the White House. Broadly speaking, do you have any memory or knowledge of any other visits by Jeffrey Epstein to the White House other than the one we just discussed?
Not that I recall, but I want to be clear, That doesn't mean that, I didn't pass somebody in the hallway, that somebody didn't pop in, but I have no recollection
Great.
of meeting with him, seeing him, conversing with him in the White House.
I'm going to fast forward all the way to 1999. We believe that Mr. Epstein contributed $20,000 to your joint fundraising account with the Democratic Party. Would you have any specific memory, knowledge, or recollection of that particular contribution sitting here today?
I do not. And again, this was something that I learned about in preparation for testifying. And as you point out, Counsel, the contribution went to the joint committee that was set up to support my Senate campaign. And my memory is that we couldn't coordinate between joint committees and campaigns. I mean, those were the rules back in the day as I recall them. So I don't have any recollection at all that I knew he contributed to my campaign. And he did not contribute, as far as I know, directly, but then this indirect contribution to the joint committee, I don't recall that I knew it at the time, and I was, surprised to learn it in preparation for testifying.
So at this point, toward the end of your husband's presidency, how would you characterize your relationships at that point with Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell?
Non-existent.
Thank you. Moving to the period after your husband's presidency, again, we don't really have much of a record to work off of. There is public reporting that sometime in 2007, Ms. Maxwell may have co-hosted a fundraiser for your presidential campaign in New York City. We don't know much about it. Christina Aguilera may have performed, if that's helpful. Do you have any specific recollection of that event?
I do not, but I, again, have been told and reminded that there was an event with a very large host committee for my campaign, and Christina did appear and I believe performed. I have no further information than that. I was attending many fundraising events, and I don't recall any specific encounter or conversation with anyone, including Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ms. Maxwell also appears to have donated $2,300 to your presidential campaign that year. Do you have any memory or knowledge of that specific contribution?
I do not.
Would it be fair to say that your presidential campaign likely would have had a fair number of donors donating $2,300 thereabouts?
Oh, many thousands. I don't recall the exact number, but my best memory is that we raised nearly $1 billion. And so it was a fast, frenetic pace. And I'm grateful for everyone who contributed, obviously, but I have no specific recollection of her contribution.
It's been widely reported, and we, I think, discussed in the previous hour, that in July of 2010, Ms. Maxwell attended your daughter's wedding in Rhinebeck, New York, and that she may have accompanied Ted Waite, who is reportedly a family friend, or at least was at the time. You, of course, were also present at the wedding. Do you have any recollection of Ms. Maxwell's attendance at the wedding?
I have no specific recollection. Obviously, there's a picture of her being at the wedding as my husband walks my daughter down the aisle. She was there as a guest of Ted Waite, someone we had known for 30 years, I believe, who was a strong supporter of my husband and became a friend. And there were more than 500 people at the wedding. So other than that picture of her at the wedding, I have no recollection of talking with her. I was pretty focused on my daughter and the wedding party and the wonderful occasion that it was. So I don't recall having any conversation other than the fact she was there, and she was there as Ted Waite's guest.
And the understanding that you had, if any, about her relationship with Mr. Waite, what was your understanding of that, if you had one?
That they must have been dating. And this was, of course, long before certainly I knew anything about the activities that she was charged with engaging in and the crimes that she was convicted of.
During her interview last year with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Ms. Maxwell said that she may have met you on a flight from Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard to New York. That's not a lot to go on, and I would note that one of the charges Ms. Maxwell faced was perjury. But do you recall ever meeting Ms. Maxwell on a flight from Massachusetts to New York?
I don't recall it. I'm not going to say it didn't happen, but I don't recall it. And my memory too, counsel, you would have to check this, but I believe I was told that in her long interview with Todd Blanche, it's Todd Blanche, right? Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, she herself said that she attended the wedding as Ted Waite's guest.
In that same interview, Ms. Maxwell said that she visited your home in Chappaqua a few times and that she was invited. Do you have any memory or knowledge of Ms. Maxwell being invited to and visiting your home?
I do not, and I was not present for any visit if one occurred.
It's been reported that in September of 2013, at a Clinton Global Initiative conference in New York, Ms. Maxwell was recognized as a Commitment to Action partner for her work on behalf of the Terramar Project, which was an ocean conservation nonprofit that she founded in 2012. Do you have any recollection of whether you were at that event? So that's a Clinton Global Initiative conference in New York in September 2013.
I believe I attended the conference, but during the conference there are many different sessions going on. There are some main stage sessions with very high profile people. We've had an extraordinary collection of world leaders, including Pope Francis and others. But then there are many of what are called breakout sessions that are smaller sessions where people gather usually around the issue they're interested in. So in this case, if it had been the oceans, there might have been a breakout session about that. And I do not recall seeing her there. I do not recall any knowledge of her being there. But if she were there and she were making a commitment, it would have been in one of these smaller sessions. And I have to add, in 2013, Ms. Maxwell spoke at the United Nations. She gave a TED Talk. She was featured for her work about oceans in a long profile on CNN. So she had a public persona that the UN, the TED Talk people, CNN and the press all recognized because nobody at that time knew what was later discovered.
And is it right to say, and it sounds like you would not have had any direct role in organizing whatever her role was at that particular event?
Not that I recall.
At that point in 2013, if you can recall, how would you have characterized your relationships with Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell?
Had no relationship, no knowledge of, never met or talked to Jeffrey Epstein. I viewed Ghislaine Maxwell as an acquaintance, someone that I might see, but had no real relationship with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I know that a couple of the minority members have just a couple questions as part of this hour as well, and so I have a few, and then I'll turn it over to a couple of the minority members as well. You can hear me okay from here?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
But it would help if the minority
Yeah.
members would move to where across.
We are. They're going to sit right here as soon as I'm.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to just begin by just asking a few questions, which I believe you've already clarified in your opening statement, but just to be very clear on the record one more time. As best as you can recall, you've never met Jeffrey Epstein.
That's true. That's correct.
As best as you can recall, and I know that, and you've said this, you've never went to the island.
Never went to the island.
You never flew with him on a plane.
Never flew with him on a plane.
and you were never aware of his horrific crimes prior to those becoming public knowledge. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted just to know, one of the questions that we've been receiving a lot has been speculation amongst the public that Jeffrey Epstein was somehow affiliated with foreign intelligence agencies or other intelligence services. And I know that we have received numerous questions of that type. Now, obviously, you served as Secretary of State. I'm grateful thank you for your service. In your role as Secretary of State, were you ever made aware of Jeffrey Epstein having any types of relationships with foreign intelligence agencies, obviously, of course, of a foreign country?
I was not. And Ranking Member Garcia, I am aware of the speculation around this that comes from the files being released and questions being raised. And I do think that is a fruitful area for the committee to investigate.
No, I appreciate that, because I'll say of the types of questions that we're receiving, the kind of conversation around whether Jeffrey Epstein had any ties to foreign intelligence or was working with foreign governments continues to come up. And so obviously, as Secretary of State, that would be something I would imagine you may or may not have information for. So I appreciate that response. Madam Secretary, just lastly, I want to also thank you for your testimony. And broadly speaking, you've probably been following just recently, and if this week, we've seen, and there's been reports that numerous files are missing from the group of files that have been released. For the record, only about approximately 50% of the total files have likely been released. The other percentage have been withheld for whatever reasons we're not really sure of and don't really understand. It's also been reported by numerous outlets this week that the FBI has removed files that are supposed to be made available to the Congress that include serious allegations of alleged abuse by President Trump, sexual abuse to a minor. Now, these are allegations that we know have been corroborated in other ways, and the media have reported on these, but these files themselves have been removed. Now, we view this as a very serious matter. I've personally looked for these files in the archive manifest that lists which files should be placed there. Those files are no longer there. And we have been calling on the DOJ and the Attorney General to release all of the files. I'm wondering if, in your experience, obviously in the U.S. Senate, as Secretary of State, if you've any response to the behavior of the DOJ in their withholding of critical information and the apparent removal of files that could suggest serious crimes by folks in this administration.
Congressman, I appreciate your raising this issue, and I appreciated the statement that you put out when this became public knowledge, thanks to investigative reporting, which revealed it. And I think that this behavior by the Justice Department deserves the most thorough investigation that the Congress could carry out. As I understand the sequence of events, this committee subpoenaed the Justice Department, as well as the Epstein estate, as well as law enforcement officials from prior administrations, as well as my husband and me. The Justice Department refused to comply, which is what led to the passage by the Congress of the Transparency Act, which then was signed into law. And I think from the very beginning, the behavior of the Attorney General and her staff has demonstrated either a gross incompetence, which is bothersome because they are the keepers of information that should be evaluated for law enforcement purposes, or a clear cover-up because they are protecting the president and others. Either one of those should be the focus of this committee to try to get to the bottom. If they are incompetent and they are incapable of complying with the law that the Congress passed, we need to know that because they are falling down on the job. They have an FBI director who's more interested in drinking beer in a hockey dressing room after our team won the Olympics, rather than being responsive and complying with the law as it has been promulgated. So I don't think it's unfair to say that given the sequencing of the events, starting with the way that President Trump made the release of the files a key element of his 2024 campaign, the promise that he and then his attorney general made that the files would be released, then a walking back of that as they began to look at the files, an ignoring of what they had promised, including that they had a client list on the desk of the attorney general, reasonable people would have to assume they are engaged in a massive cover-up, which is infuriating. As an American, as a citizen, all of us should be, regardless of party, wondering what are they hiding. And that's why I said in my opening statement, the President of the United States is not above the law and should be, in a setting like this, answering questions under oath, as should others who are prominently featured in the files, and especially the group that is featured after 2008. Because prior to 2008, when Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty to the watered-down charges that Alex Acosta negotiated and then was rewarded for in the first Trump administration with a cabinet position, there are so many unanswered questions. And I looked at the transcript of the Alex Acosta testimony that was taken before this committee, and I don't think that any Republican members asked him a question. So you have to conclude that there is something rotten in the state of Denmark, or clearly the Justice Department, starting in the White House and at the top with the Attorney General. And this latest example of the missing files about the allegations, and they are absolutely nothing more than allegations, but the FBI interviewed that witness 4 times. You don't interview a non-credible witness 4 times. You don't put into the FBI reporting, protect this source, if you think there is nothing to it. So, of course, I would like to know, like every other American deserves to know, what is in those files and who is going to hold people accountable, because the Justice Department seems to be either unwilling or incapable of doing so.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Let me also just add one thing. You've probably also read reporting that Secretary Lutnick was pretty open in an interview about not having spoken to Mr. Epstein or interacted with him after 2005. And then we go on to learn that Secretary Lutnick not only went to the island, there were visits, they went into possible business together, communicated with his wife. So there were numerous interactions that happened after that interview. We believe that Secretary Lutnick should be in front of this committee answering questions, especially when he's choosing to essentially lie about his interactions with Mr. Epstein. Would you agree that Secretary Lutnick should come and testify?
I think everyone that the committee sees playing a prominent role in the files should be deposed. That is your job. Your job is to try to get to the truth as best as you can determine it. And that should be the guiding principle, it seems to me, as to who you ask to come before you.
Thank you.
Hello, Congressman.
Hello. Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. I'm going to ask you a few questions that might be a little redundant.
That's
but
okay.
Just to get on the record. Am I correct that you did not know at any point before Jeffrey Epstein's crimes became public that Epstein committed or facilitated sexual abuse of minors and young women?
That is correct.
And prior to Epstein's crimes becoming public, were you ever warned not to associate with him?
Not that I recall.
And you did not know at any point before Maxwell's crimes became public that she committed or facilitated sexual abuse of minors or young women?
That is correct.
And did anyone ever raise concerns to you about Miss Maxwell or warn you not to associate with her at any point?
Not that I recall.
Thank you. And you served as First Lady and U.S. Senator and Secretary of State. And so you met a lot of other heads of state, foreign dignitaries. And so at any point, did Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell's names come up?
Not that I recall.
And you mentioned you did a lot of work on human trafficking. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And then also, I would love to know if Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell's names ever came up.
No, I can tell you that those names never came up, as I said, prior to their crimes becoming public. I don't think people knew. Or if they did know, they were not sharing that. Or if they did share it with the FBI or the Justice Department, the investigations never went anywhere. So I don't know that anybody would have ever raised those names, and I don't know that anybody knew to even look into it. You know, as I said, the whole question of human trafficking, sexual slavery, forced labor, domestic violence, for the longest time were not even considered crimes. And it took a lot of effort on the part of many, many courageous people around the world to raise the visibility of these crimes and to actually change criminal law in many countries. You know, when I spoke in 1995 at the UN World Conference on Women in Beijing, that was one of the issues everyone was struggling with. Domestic violence was considered cultural, not criminal. Sexual slavery was just something that happened. You know, young women were forced into prostitution. All of this was certainly known and was something that had gone on for, you know, centuries, thousands of years. But there became finally enough outrage and organizational impetus to begin to try to change that. And that's what I worked on when I was First Lady, because I really became aware as I traveled to Asia and Africa, even Eastern Europe, particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union, what a big criminal network was operating around the world to traffic people. And obviously we're here focusing on what happened to, you know, girls and women with being sexually abused, but it's also true that people were forced into labor in mines and fishing boats. I mean, this was a phenomenon that finally was getting attention. And we worked very hard to raise visibility. I mentioned the law that was finally passed in our country in 2000. There was also something called the Palermo Protocol, where nations came together to pledge themselves to change laws, to implement enforcement against trafficking. So it's been a long struggle, but we've tried to focus on preventing it, prosecuting it, and protecting the survivors, and we've made progress. But obviously, we're here today talking about crimes that still are happening even in our own country.
I know the public wants names to be named, and I know this is a difficult question for you given your lack of a relationship with Epstein or Maxwell, but are there any names that you think we should be talking to at this point that haven't been out there already?
I don't know any more than you do as to what's being exposed in the files. I saw where Congressman Massey stood on the floor the other day and said that he named 3 people, as I recall, that should be investigated. But there's a long list of people who may